Good morning and good afternoon, coaches and parents and admins and PCA supporters. Welcome to our fourth Roundtable webinar, a part of our Sports Can Battle Racism initiative. My name is Marty Reed, and I'm the co-chair of our SCBR committee and the National Partnerships and Marketing Manager for Positive Coaching Alliance. We set out to use our platform as a vehicle for change. And as a national nonprofit, we will continue to be leaders in the educational space and provide resources and tools to improve youth sports culture and ensure a positive youth development experience for all kids. We believe that sports and play for kids is a basic human right, and without access to sport and structured play, kids miss out on critical benefits, including physical health, social emotional growth, academic development, the list goes on. And while talent is universal, opportunity is not. Today's conversation will be focused on actively increasing access and improving the experiences of young athletes from viewpoints of experts in highly affluent sports of golf, tennis, water polo, and hockey. This conversation is extremely important, and we all understand the benefits of youth sport participation. And if you're on this call, you already know that improving access in youth sports is very important. We don't have to convince anyone of the why. So today's conversation will really be diving in. We'll be going to level 2. We'll be talking more about barriers we're facing and how to get through them. So I'm so excited for the extraordinary panel we're going to hear from today. Grab your notepads, grab your pens, get ready to take some notes. And as always, feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A feature throughout today's conversation. And thanks again for joining us. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to the Director of PCA Central Region and my fellow co-chair of our SCBR committee, who will be introducing and moderating today's panel, Trennis Jones. Take it away.
Good afternoon, good morning for some. Thank you, Marty. Really excited to be here and honored to be amongst this elusive panel. So exclusive, not elusive, but exclusive panel. So what we'll do is introduce the 4 folks that we have with you today by way of just what they've done, ask them a question, and then we'll jump right into it. So without further ado, alphabetically, we'll start with Mr. Jamal Mayers, who spent 14 plus years in the NHL, winning a Stanley Cup with the Chicago Blackhawks in 2013. He also is an author, not a shameless plug, but an actual plug he's an author of Hockey is for Me, a story about younger Jamal as a 6-year-old leading into the hockey space and being interested in that sport. He also is an NBA Sports Chicago commentator, as well as a liaison for the Chicago Blackhawks. And probably most importantly, at least for this topic, this conversation, Jamal is committed his post-playing career to creating a safer space, a healthier space for Chicago kids in non-traditional hockey spaces. And so without further ado, Mr. Jamal Mayers. Jamal, thank you for being here. The question I have for you is, what would a 6-year-old Jamal need the most right now, not only to get into hockey, but to stay in hockey?
Well, that's like peeling away an onion. There's, first of all, Trennis, thanks for having me. There's so many different components when it comes to answering that question. But before any of them, you have to believe it's possible. And I've been very fortunate, having played a long time, and then figuring out what I wanted to do after playing. The Blackhawks approached me in 2014 about coming on board and trying to be a face of some of the programs that they had already started to help push that forward. And with the idea being that if kids could see it, then they would want to become it. And so hopefully I've been that for a lot of kids, in that they can see someone that looks like them, that plays a non-traditional sport, for Black and brown kids to see that it's possible. I've really enjoyed that process, but above all else, before we get into the socioeconomic challenges that hockey presents, I believe families of whatever financial background that don't look like the normal hockey players, if you will, have to believe it's possible and have to believe that it's an inclusive and safe place for them, for parents to put their kids. And so that to me is the biggest obstacle. Make it so that kids and families think that it's a good idea, that they want to be a part of the sport. And then we can talk about and dive into the issues about and the challenges that occur about getting into the sport from a financial and resources basis.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jamal. Look forward to this conversation. Next up is Mr. Clint Sanchez. Clint is also a PCA alum. Clint is the executive director of the First Tee of the Washington, D.C. area. The First Tee is an organization, an international youth development organization that introduces the game of golf and its inherent values to kids and teens. And so the question I have for you, Clint, is why is the work that you do with the First Tee as far as introducing the sport of forwards to the younger population so essential to growing the game and the game's health?
Yeah, thank you, Trennis. I think the biggest thing is, golf is one of those few sports that can be played for a lifetime. You can play from the time you're 3 or 4 years old up until your whole life, basically, if health allows you to. And, I think it's something that can be enjoyed, but it's really the values that you get through the game of golf, the inherent values that golf teaches that we try to teach at First Tee, things like confidence and responsibility and judgment and perseverance, that'll help you in all walks of life, not just on the golf course. So with our kids, when we're out there on the golf course, on the driving range, in the schools, we're constantly talking about these values, and they're seamlessly integrated into the First Tee curriculum. So I would say the values that the game of golf teaches, relationship building, appreciating diversity, things like that, will last for a lifetime. But you got to have that interest first. And that's really what we're trying to do at First Tee, is really get kids interested in this game. And you're really using golf as the vehicle to teach those life skills.
Thank you, Clint. It's an amazing game. We appreciate you being here. Next up is Mrs. Sybil Smith. Sybil is a former collegiate swimmer at Boston University, and not just a former swimmer, but also the first African-American swimmer to achieve first team All-American Division I status, as she was a swimmer. So she did her thing when she was in the water. She also happens to be the mother of Sloane Stephens, Sloane is the winner of the women's singles in the U.S. Open in 2017, excuse me. And Sybil also serves as the executive director of the Sloane Stephens Foundation. So Sybil, thank you for being here. The question we have off the bat for you is, as you contemplated which programs and which coaches you allowed your daughter, or your children clearly, but your daughter in particular, to develop, what were the questions that you asked and the assessments that you kind of put people through to make sure that they were deserving of being able to coach her?
Wow, what a good question, and thanks for having me. Really appreciate being here today. From the very beginning, when Sloane started tennis, I was a tennis fan, so I pretty much chose tennis for Sloane. She was playing all kinds of other sports, but the biggest thing about tennis for us is that one of her first coaches was just an incredible person. He was a Davis Cup player for Puerto Rico and a tennis, great tennis player. And he was kind, sincere, genuine, thoughtful, fun, charismatic. And, it's, as a parent, you just sense the person you want your child to be around. And I wouldn't even say as a mom, as a parent, really, you sense who that person is, who that role model is, more like a teacher. The characteristics of a teacher, when you go in to have those parent-teacher conferences, you know that that's the right person to lead your child or guide your child on a daily basis. So I've always looked for that from the very beginning with Sloan, from that first coach even to her coach now. He's a thoughtful guy. Just she's had several coaches in between, but I'm always looking for that person who will be a strong role model for her. Even now she's 27 years old, and it's important to make sure that there's a quality human being working with my daughter.
Thank you for that. Yes, you didn't mention the forehand or serves not one time in that entire answer, right? So that's obviously why we're here. It's a cultural characteristic, or at least just making sure that the right people are in front of your greatest gift. So thank you for being here. And last but certainly not least, we have Miss Brenda Villa. Brenda is the most decorated athlete ever in women's water polo. She is one of 4 female players that have competed in 4 Olympics in water polo. She is one of 2 female athletes that have won 4 Olympic gold medals in water polo. She's an International Swimming Hall of Famer. She is a USA Polo Hall of Famer. She's a proud Stanford grad. And the question I have for you, Brenda, is, who introduced you to water polo, and why did it stick the way that it did?
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on this panel with so many people that are making a difference. For me, it was my city. I go back to like city programs and access and opportunity to a very wide affluent sport. I'm a daughter of immigrants. Sports and aquatics wasn't something that was on their radar. I happened to grow up in the city of Commerce, who has a beautiful aquatic facility, and they also have the resources to offer swim lessons at a low cost, free access to a club team, travel fees, equipment, everything was included. So my mom, because she wasn't water safe, right, wanted her kids to be water safe. So for me, it started as water safety and then access to a program. And I think once my mom saw that I was just as good as all the boys at 10 and under water polo, she was like, let's go, let's do this. So for me, really, it comes down to the city having the investment in youth and allowing anybody to be part of a very exclusive sport.
Thank you for being here. We're happy for everybody to be able to listen to these folks. And so we're going to jump right into it. And so my first question, and I'll open it up, but first question, starting with Jamal, is what do you feel like are the main barriers to access in hockey? And what are those barriers that maybe aren't as obvious, right? Ice time and things of that sort are clear, but what are the ones that aren't spoken about enough? And then certainly would love to open it after Jamal answers, open it up to the rest of the group around certainly golf, water polo, and tennis, respectively.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that I mentioned prior was that you have to believe it's possible. And once you get past kids that actually want and are interested, obviously, a lot of times the rinks aren't in the areas of the inner city. And one of the things that I'm proud of being part of the Blackhawks and helping push forward what they're doing now is that, our owner built a new practice facility a few years ago and decided to build an extra sheet of ice and name it the community ice rink for a reason. And that's to help serve the West Side community in Chicago and get kids to get out there and enjoy and play the game. And so, but the first part for me is break barriers to get into the schools. And that's one of the things we do with a program called Goal, which is come out and we bring over like sticks and balls, and we make it as simple as possible, kind of eliminating the ice portion, which can kind of scare kids off a little bit. and just get them in love with the organic way I grew up in Canada. So just playing ball hockey, street hockey, kind of making it fun in their gym class. And so once we get them excited about the game, we can introduce the ice. And then the Blackhawks pay for the buses to take the kids to the practice facility. And we have a program called First Ride, where once those kids have done the goal program, they get to come over to the practice facility and try skating for the first time. And the kids that enjoy that get to then fall into the girls and boys get to fall into the hockey, the Little Blackhawks program. So there's many challenges. I think that to have a program that's sustained, you have to make it accessible. You have to make the cost prohibitive. And the reality is that there's also a thing called the Industry Growth Fund, where the NHL and the NHL Players Association actually partnered to create this program and fund and make it the cost very minimal. So every NHL city has a city program for kids to try hockey for up to 10 times, less than $150, head to toe gear, and 10 lessons to see if you like it. Because let's be honest, for kids and families, that kids might be interested in the game, but a parent sitting there thinking, wow, how would I possibly see if they even like it and spend all hundreds of dollars? Well, we'll just give you a basketball, we'll give you a soccer ball. Let's try something that's less expensive. So I think the players recognize that, and the league, fortunately, has recognized that we create programs to reduce the cost to get kids just to try it. Who knows if they'll like it?
Thank you for that. Anybody else there, just that first initial barrier that we need to get past to allow kids an opportunity just to learn and experience the game?
I think for golf, it's really that perception that golf is, a rich person's sport, or is just for a certain segment of people. And that's, I mentioned earlier, the interest. You got to have the interest. So I'm really trying to get kids to try it is our biggest challenge. I think Sybil was kind of talking about that earlier when we were getting together. So I think the perception is a challenge, and then transportation is a challenge too. Jamal's overcome that transportation a little bit through the Blackhawks and the buses, and I think that's critical. But getting kids to the facility, to the golf course, is always a challenge, I would say.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, Clint and Jamal. Like, transportation, I have to tell you, is such a major issue for us right now, and has been from the inception of our program, because as much as kids would love to come out and play in our neighborhood program, we have a free program for all the kids in Compton Unified School District. And it's still challenging because kids can't walk down the street to get to the tennis courts. And it's not safe, a lot of the times. And even when it is safe, they may live on the opposite side of the city, so they can't get there. And that's probably our biggest barrier, because the interest is there. Our program starts in elementary school, so we introduce tennis to kids in elementary schools, and the kids are excited about it, and they love it, and it's something new. They can play all the other sports and they have that access, but it's fun. The equipment is there, but to extend that beyond playing at school, you have to be able to get to another site. And I think that's always a challenge when families are taking the bus to get to work, or to get to school, or just to get to the grocery store. So those are things to think about, and how we break that barrier to provide that access.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
please, Brenda.
No, I was gonna say, I agree with everything that is being said. And transportation, like for the program that I grew up in, we had buses and vans that took us to games. So that was a huge thing that I never realized until once I was away from my program. And for us in water polo, it's access to the pools, right? Like, I'm sure like ice is hard to come by, right? So it's like, how do we make that more accessible? And then something that water polo is focusing on is, can we shift the conversation to just water safety? How do we make everyone water safe, and then give them the opportunities to pick an aquatic sport? But without the water safety piece, how do we get kids in the pool?
No, thank you for that. And let's acknowledge the elephant in the room also, right? Like, once we get the kids there, there's a cultural barrier oftentimes for these kids to say, well, that's not a sport for us or for me. You know, how do you approach those conversations that are clearly not accurate, but still are being presented nonetheless? How do you approach those conversations from the parents and the kids oftentimes about a new sport that they're unfamiliar with, or, you know, they haven't seen as many people that look like them participating in?
Wow, that's a big challenge for us, but it's actually a fun challenge because kids, you know, they've never seen tennis on TV, most of our kids. So, you know, to bring tennis rackets and portable nets into a school, they just see it as another fun sport. And it's just funny because it's a bit of a sales job, but fun is fun for kids. And we found that, you know, our coaches do a great job of really promoting and getting out and showing the kids and you know, modeling the activities so that, you know, the kids, it's like playing, you know, volleyball with a racket or golf with a bigger ball. You know, you can find ways of selling it and pitching it because it is fun. And I think most sports for kids are fun, and it's just how the kids envision themselves in the activity and whether they connect to it and align with it. And, you know, most kids align with fun. So we find that, you know, the sales job isn't too challenging, you know, to get them pumped up about it. I'd say, Brenda, is probably more challenging for you because kids have to get wet and cold, or being on the ice might be a little bit different, but to get out in the sunshine and hit tennis balls with a racket, and it's, you know, the sales job and the coach's role is really, really important to help them see that they belong and it's fun and it is meant for them. So that's the biggest thing with our coaches. They come back and they say, well, they weren't really interested today. But as the program grows, and say we have it in PE or during a physical education time, say at a middle school, the kids grow to love it. You know, they just grow to love it and they participate and have a great time.
So with our sport, it's a little bit different in that with a team dynamic, it's a little bit more challenging. And so there has to be an educational component. So our sport, in my opinion, has to have a little bit of a cultural shift to make the environment more inclusive and more accepting. And with the understanding that it's going to enrich the experience, it's going to make it a much more vibrant place when there are differences. And so that has to happen with USA Hockey, and it has to happen with Hockey Canada, to make sure that we're creating a space where parents say, you know what, I like the values and the lessons that those kids have from playing that game. I think it's a great place for my son or daughter to go play. And so for me, that's the biggest challenge, is culturally, there has to be an educational component where we parent inherent bias about microaggressions not said, so that there's an understanding that within that space, it's not going to change what's going on necessarily in society, but we have to make sure we protect that space so that parents feel like it's okay to have my child there, and they're going to grow and become good people because of it through the game. And so that's one of the things we're doing as a sport, is understanding, first of all, that we have to educate people, whether it's the officials, the coaches, the parents, on what those things are happening. And so that parents of traditional hockey families say, you know what, I'm going to give it a try. And so we're going through that process now. And I think that there's a lot of work certainly to be done, but we have to make sure it's a safe place for kids, or else parents, they're just not going to choose the game. But culturally, there has to be a shift.
Thank you for that. Clint, speak to that, you know, the country club atmosphere of golf and what that means.
Sure. Well, I think really I'll speak to it in terms of, like, first, he was created to kind of change the way people looked at golf and really try to provide those opportunities to kids who otherwise wouldn't have access to them. So it's really, you know, timely for the discussion today about it. You know, this nonprofit was, you know, created 22, 23 years ago to create access to this lifelong game. And, you know, out of that, 150 chapters have spawned across the country, and 8 or 10 chapters, now 10 chapters internationally. And I think we've got some great partners, which certainly helps. Partners that want to grow the game, and they see golf as it's been looked at over the years, and they see the need for change. And we strongly partner with those organizations, whether it's the PGA or the USGA, for help. But the bottom line is, I think making your programs accessible, and then once you have them accessible, we're a program for everyone. We turn no one away. Our diversity is one of the strongest parts of our chapter, at over 65%. And but to Sybil's point, you got to make it fun. And I think really, especially with golf, I mean, it's very like tennis too. I mean, it's so critical to make that game fun. You're out there in the sun, or out there in the cold, whether it's March or August, whatever it is. So really having that, fun atmosphere, colorful targets, making it easier to putt the ball in a little hole, maybe get a bigger, hula hoop, and just kind of putting in a hula hoop and starting it, moving the goalpost, if you will, to use a sports analogy. So, I think really just trying to break down those barriers, though, and create this program that is for everybody, and offering it to the community and turning no one away, and making it affordable or free for everybody.
Thank you, Clint. And Brenda, the stigma that, brown people don't swim. Clearly, we got two brown people on this call that can swim laps around people, right? So speak to that incorrect stigma of water, and, how do you get people not only to get in the water, but also to, participate in the sport within the water?
I agree with a lot of what's already been said. And one thing that I'll kind of elaborate with Jamal saying, and team sports are a little different. And right now USA Water Polo is undergoing like self-reflection, if you may, right? We created this racial equity and reform task force. We're taking a deeper dive at a lot of things, because we do need to make our sport more inclusive. We need to make it safe for everyone to participate. We want parents to think about our sport and know that if their kids join, even though there's not a lot of them playing, they're still going to be safe and accepted for who they are. So that comes with training, that comes with, relooking at our code of conduct, that comes with like education pieces. So we created this task force with 14 members that have all the stakeholders in the room, right? Like coaches, referees, parents. So I'm co-chairing that in this moment, and we've made some progress, but there's a lot of change that needs to happen. So we're hoping to help with that cultural shift. And I agree that you also have to make it fun, right? And, for us, when kids learn to swim, it's like, hey, here's a ball. This is also a new fun sport to play with, right? Because kids love a ball. So it's like, here, pass to your friend, pass to your teammate. And we have like splash ball, which is smaller floating goals, and you can play it in shallow water, and just to kind of introduce them to something new. And then just the last piece is the representation piece. And I think Jamal earlier, it's like, you have to believe it, you have to see it. So one thing for me is I continue to stay in the spotlight, so to say, just because I want kids to know that you don't have to be a certain mold. You don't have to look a certain way. I break all molds of what people think a water polo, an Olympic champion should look like, right? In water polo, like I'm 5'4", Latina, like, curvier than most. So I'm just different. So it's like, look, we don't all have to look a certain way. So give us a try.
Well, you got 4 gold medals that prove that otherwise, right? So, excuse me.
Well, I have 1 gold, 2 silvers, and a bronze.
Earlier, 4 medals,
I was like,
excuse me. Yes.
I wish I had 4 gold. So just throwing that in there.
Okay, well, we'll cut that, the rest of the specifics. The 4 gold sounded better.
I'm telling people I was a 4-time gold medalist. I don't know about you guys.
Hey, have at it. So excuse me for that. But so you all have spoken to the culture of those spaces, right? Is there a person or a role that you think within your respective sport that has more weight? Like, where should we start? Is it the coach? Is it the administrator? Is it the kids themselves? Is it the parent? Do you feel like, there's no wrong answer to this, but just who do you think we should start with in terms of just pouring into that culture?
Well, I think allyship comes in a lot of forms. And I think, we can't underestimate, especially in our sport, and I am on a players inclusion council with the NHL, trying to get a shift in the culture, and really everything's on the table. But I think that I'm encouraged. I look at the 20 to 30-year-old, which is kind of the meat of the current players' age, and that demographic, that age group of players are so much more thoughtful, understanding, compassionate than my generation ever was. And I think they understand and really take to heart the power and the influence they can have to make things better. And so because of that, I'm really encouraged to use them to really push this forward. The old guard, if you will, about what's okay and what's not okay. And so for me, I think it starts with the top at the top. You have to change it culture, and it has to be intentional. I'm very encouraged, and I keep going back to the Blackhawks, but I've been a part of seeing it in different organizations. It's not like this. They're very intentional about their civic responsibility and understanding from a top-down approach what has to change, doing the work, the internal audits that have to happen, that are currently happening, to change culture, to make sure that there's gender and race equity within the organization, to make sure that things are a lot more flat in regard to decision making. But again, it's so layered and so many different pieces, Trennis. But I believe that it starts in different levels, but it has to start from the top, because that sets the tone and the culture. So I'm encouraged that the NHL level is being intentional and wants to change things. I'm also encouraged as we go down, even on a local level with our team, we're doing things because it's important to our ownership. And so, and then to me, it goes down to the kids and how we change things culturally and how we change the way that we talk and communicate in that space, and making it zero tolerance language, as I think Brenda is leaning toward, and making sure those checks and balances in place so that kids feel safe. You walk into the space, it feels welcoming. We're going through that right now. We look at our practice facility, it's beautiful. Well, I think we've recognized, you know what? We have to start speaking to the West Side. Do kids from the West Side walk in there and feel, does it look like a museum to them? They can't touch anything. No, we got to change some of that aesthetic so that they feel like it's part of them. And so there's so many different pieces to it. But I think what's more important as you go through this process is that you're intentional about it and that you mean it. And it's not just checking off a box. Oh, let's make sure we're doing this because this is a hot button item right now. Let's do it because it, we're going to make real change. And I don't know about your guys' sports as well, but I know about our sport. The demographics of the United States is going in a certain direction. And let's be honest, it makes good business sense for us to look outside that. Look at, to grow as a sport. And I've been saying this for 5 years, we better start marketing and making sure it's more inclusive and inviting, or else our sport is not going to grow. And I don't know how your guys' sport is, but that's really going to be an issue for hockey if we don't fix it.
Thank you for that. Anybody else would love to add, please? Just where do we start?
I think, Jamal, you make great points there. And I'll speak to the school district we work in and also to the United States Tennis Association, USTA, although I can't speak for them. I've been involved for many, many years with Sloan's, with my daughter's participation. And with both organizations, as you said, it has to be intentional. The organization from the top down has to make the decision to make programming within the sport accessible and attainable for children who are non-traditional in the sport. And without that intentional attitude, the layers don't lift. There's no peeling of that onion. You can't permeate the skin. So, from an administrative standpoint, if the intention is there, the access opens and changes, and people along the way make sure that the accessibility starts to happen and the attitudes do start to change. But without that leadership focused on that, sincerely focused on it, there will be no change. So speaking to the school district issue, 5 years ago, we went in, Sloan actually made the presentation for our organization. We were really fortunate. And she, sat with the board, school board, and said, hey, we want to make sure that Black and brown kids get exposed to tennis. And overwhelmingly, they were excited about it because they have all sports. They've got MLB coming in and assisting, lots of sports. They don't have swimming and water polo. They don't have hockey, they don't have field hockey. They don't have anything really, lacrosse. They don't have those sports. So they were really keen to just get kids involved in something new and provide that access. And we were just that organization that we were the vehicle to provide the access for the kids. So again, without the leadership making the decision to provide the access, we'd have no way to get involved and introduce the sport to kids within the school district. So they ensured the access happened.
Yeah, I would say from a PGA Tour perspective, they were a founding partner of First Tee in 1997. And without the PGA Tour's support, First Tee wouldn't be where it is today. But now First Tee is all the nonprofits, all the chapters are directly underneath the First Tee national, underneath the PGA Tour as the PGA Tour's nonprofit, which I think certainly helps. So I think we're getting the support that we are from the top, if you will, similar to what Sybil was saying about the USTA. I think that's critical. So I think that's certainly from a top-down level has helped. But on the smaller level, I think especially in golf, I think Trinish, you mentioned your earlier question about the country club sport. That can be a great place to start. And so each First Tee chapter has a board of directors. And a lot of the board of directors are, folks that have been involved in business in the community for years and years and years. They have a lot of great relationships, and they may or may not be members at country clubs. But I just know that we've had some great opportunities to get in front of these people, these country clubs, and have a few of our kids there and tell their story and tell about the impact that the game of golf and First Tee specifically has had on their lives. And that can have just lasting impact. It's got to be, it's organically, obviously you start, you start with one and it kind of snowballs from there. But I would say in golf, seeing those folks, having our kids see those folks, more importantly, having those folks see our kids can be a game changer and a culture changer.
Something that's different, I think, in my sport than the three sports represented here is we don't have a professional league that, like, the money to help support it isn't quite there. So just to throw that out there. And I think, yes, it starts at the top, right? You need the board to be supportive of all these initiatives, which fortunately for us, we are in that position, right? The board is supporting this. We created this task force, and now there's like a designated fund for DE&I. So it's like, okay, we have this. So how can we encourage people that are passionate about water polo and passionate about this and invite them to help? So we need to get creative in the way we can make this cultural shift. And with this task force, there's a piece of it where we're going into resources, right? And we're getting data, and it's like, how do we partner with existing programs? Like, how do we start thinking outside of the box to help our smaller NGB create the change that we want to see, which may take longer for a smaller sport because sometimes you do need funding, but it's like, that's not all you need, right, to change a culture. So it's like, how do we, work smarter, I guess.
And even transitioning to that, how do we tell the historical story of, the Herb Carnegies and the Charlie Siffers in golf and the Althea Gibsons and the Brenda Villas in water polo? How do we promote by way of using kind of the facts of history that people have competed in these spaces before and been highly successful? Like, how do we start telling that story better?
I would say that we need some of mainstream, right, to kind of help us tell those stories. And I know that for like smaller sports, it's a little harder. You don't always see them, or we continue to focus on one story. So I know that for water polo, like my club team, the City of Commerce, which does amazing work, but it's unique and it's only, but there are other programs in the US that are doing great work. So can we also promote them, right? We can't keep going back to this one program. I mean, they're fabulous, right? 2 Olympians came out of this small city in Southeast Los Angeles, but there are other programs. So how do we continue to shine the light in other locations so that our sport knows that it is happening? There are stories. You don't have to be an Olympian, an Olympic gold medalist to be a success story in our sport. Let's talk about all the brown and black kids that are getting to college, right? And are playing their sport in college, whether it's D1, D2, D3, like it shouldn't matter. So I think, how do we help that narrative shift to focus on other things? I guess decenter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else there? Or just how do we let people know the history of the rich history of these sports?
Yeah, I think Trinish, you mentioned one person, Charlie Sifford, and so we're really big on that at First Tee, especially in Washington D.C. We have a historic Langston Golf Course, which is not far from RFK Stadium, where Washington used to play, football games. And Lee Elder was the head pro at Langston for about 7 years, from the late 70s to the early 80s. Helped build the driving range. And with the Masters being last week, there was an announcement made that Lee Elder is going to be the honorary starter, one of the honorary starters at next year's Masters in 2021. So he'll be alongside Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player. And what a wonderful opportunity for the game of golf right there. And so that's got some great, media coverage last week. Unfortunately, our programs ended in early November, so we really weren't with our kids to tell that story. But when we have stories like that, or just really historical stories on people like Charlie Sifford and Lee Elder and Lee Trevino or Jim Dent or whoever it might be, really telling those kids about them, because they probably have no idea. We've got some great coaches who are historians in their own right, and they do a great job telling that history and making it fun during class. So I think it's something you just have to be cognizant of and intentional and have fun with too.
Yeah, for me, I really put it back on the parents. I think it's the parents' job to, if we sit here collectively and wait for mainstream media to talk about all our collective sports and the contributions that people that are black and brown that played, or minorities that played the sport, have done amazing things, it's never going to happen. So I put it back on the parents to, I have a 15 and 12-year-old daughters. My son is 8. I think it's important for me as a dad to tell them those stories, to seek out that information so that they see their world bigger than it is. And that, to me, is the real goal of playing these sports, is so that I see it in the kids' faces. I see it when the kids in Chicago haven't been past their 2-block, 3-block radius. And now all of a sudden they're interested in hockey and they're playing the game. And now they have a teammate whose dad is an architect, and they realize, I like to draw and I'm good at math, and what is that? And now their world is so much greater. And so again, I put it on the parents to seek out that information, find that information. It's there. But you're right, those stories aren't being told. There was the NHL has made a dent. They have a truck that travels around the league, but you usually only see it. It's Black History Month. And on that truck are the stories of Herb Carnegie, the stories of the black hockey players in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and guys that played in the Negro League in hockey that were amazing hockey players that never got a chance before Willie O'Ree finally broke the color barrier in the 50s. So, again, I just really think that it's the parents that have to take the lead on that. And, you know, I'm a little embarrassed that I don't know your guys' stories even more. So I'm going to do the homework to read about you and make sure my kids in the next week are aware.
And Sybil, certainly tennis has an amazing history, right, with Mr. Ash and Miss Gibson and all the rest. Please speak to just the, you know, the strong history that tennis has.
Tennis has an incredible history. You know, Arthur Ashe, Althea Gibson, you know, recently Zena Garrison, Lori McNeil. There's so many incredible players, male and female, who've been in the sport forever. Pancho Gonzalez, like, you know, it's interesting that we don't have a cultural sports hall of fame in every school district, that where there's a bus or a van that goes to school, sort of like the dental van, and gives kids access to something outside of themselves. Because you can see traditional sports figures who don't look like you on television on a regular basis. That's sort of the mainstream. But, you know, beyond that, the history, the historical perspective of all the sports, baseball, water sports, you know, hockey, you name it, golf, it seems that we have to do a better job of just getting those stories out. I don't know what that is. I really don't. I know for us within our programming, in our summer programming, we take a lot of time to show a lot of history. We have a day-long program, so we dedicate an hour of basically watching YouTube videos in a big gym at Centennial High School in Compton, where the kids get to see the Althea Gibsons and the stories and short movies and clips, you know, of players, global players, tennis players is our primary focus. But that's, you know, we're one group exposing, you know, a very small number of kids to that sport. And the kids don't have access to this at home. A lot of our kids don't have Wi-Fi or internet at home until the pandemic, where now there's more accessibility just because the schools provided it at home. But kids don't often have the opportunity when they're under-resourced. They don't have access. There's no way for them to find this information. There's no way for us to expose it to them unless we really make a concerted effort on a grander scale to provide that information. And that information it's powerful. It's great. These kids need to see the history of all sports and to see where they might fit in, where their ancestors fit in, where their ancestors were the founding fathers of a sport, or the founding participants of a sport, or just laid the groundwork for greatness in something so special as sport. That's a question that I don't think any of us can answer, but I think we, you know, as Jamal said, you know, with everyone on the call today, you know, Brenda, listen, I'm Googling you and I'm looking. I'm excited to just learn more about all of you and participate in what you're doing, because I'm inspired right now by all of you. So I want to make sure that I'm that vehicle that inspires the kids I work with, and that my daughter uses her platform to continue to, you know, impact kids globally, you know, no matter where she goes. You know, kids need to see that she's special in her sport, and they can be special too, no matter what they look like, no matter who they are. And we've all got a lot of work to do.
I think with Jamal's comment about bringing it back to the parents, I'm like, call to action. Are there videos I can share with parents? How do we make it easier for them to have access, right, to these role models in the sport, to give them the history behind it? And I know that in my city, my city is really special in the sense where the first women's international water polo tournament was played in my city. Like, they're really like the front runners in pushing the women's game in the US, but it's like, how many people know that? Like, I know that because I grew up there. So I'm inspired just by the suggestions you all are making in this panel. So we've got work to do.
One of the questions I have, certainly for you all that have occupied your spaces in an isolated way, right? Oftentimes being the only, you know, what did you pull from yourself in the midst of your competition, knowing that you are oftentimes the only Black or brown person in that space, to continue to push through, something that's uncomfortable oftentimes, for you to be successful. And certainly, Sybil, you've inspired your daughter, but obviously you accomplished that yourself, before her. So what did you pull from internally to make sure that you overcame those obstacles?
Wow. Well, you see, I got my daughter into a sport that was just as difficult as swimming. Like, she was, one of the few. Although Sloan she had role models. Growing up, Sloan got to watch Venus and Serena play tennis. She was 8 or 9 years old, and they were winning Grand Slams. So she had a great exposure and got to see that. For me, it's such a challenge when you're the only person in a sport for so long. You just sort of you play sport because you love the sport. And staying in the sport it's hard. It's just that you want to be there, and no one can pull you away from what you love to do. And I'd say that when the passion goes away, it's because lots of things can impact you. You don't belong, or you feel like you don't belong, or you're being taunted, or what have you. But really, when your heart's in it, like, that's what drives you, and you have to always count on your fire and your fuel, and never let anything turn you from what you want to do. Like, nothing should be able to deter you. And we've got to teach kids that. And that's, I think, what sport gives you. And if you got a great foundation in sports, you got a great foundation in life.
Perfect. Anybody else there? Just how you were able to overcome those spaces?
For me, I was lucky to be in a program where there were so many brown kids, right? And I got the confidence from my program to then make a youth team, a junior national team, an Olympic team. And then once I reached the highest level, I was lonely. And then it was kind of like, I need to do this because I need to show everyone that we can, right? And then I competed for 4 Olympics. And then now I still haven't stepped away from the sport because there's still not enough of us playing. So I'm stubborn to stay in the spotlight because I want kids to see that it's possible, and I'm still here. You can do it. But yeah, it was just to show that we could do it. You could look different and still be successful in this sport. So a lot of it was that, and a lot of it was the support of my parents, right? And my mom telling me, like, you're just as good as anyone. It doesn't matter that I go to your games and I cheer for you in Spanish. Like, does that matter? No. And so that was something that's always driven me, like my family and that support, and just showing that we can do it.
And Jamal, same question, and certainly if you could speak to that, but also speak to the importance of having white allies like your teammates support you in those tough moments, for you to be able to make it through a tough time and know that you're not by yourself.
Yeah, for me, it came from my mom, single parent home. I was about 14, and my this and continue. But I think some and very strong-minded people that wouldn't be told no at any stage. And so I think we're the easy examples. It's the kids that don't have that confidence that maybe choose to walk away. That's why the culture in each sport has to change. And in context of white allyship, I felt this huge burden until I was about 16 years old, I think, that I wanted all my teammates to like me and know that I cared. I was a good teammate. And I let that go around 16, 17 years old, maybe when I went to college, and just realized, you know what? If guys on my team don't like me, it's because they don't like me. I'm not going to carry this burden around, but I have to be the example of every Black person, every Black player that they maybe never encountered in their life. And having said that, I also found that as you moved up, through college and into the NHL, into pros, it didn't matter. What mattered was that you were going to help the team win, and that you were brought value to the table. It didn't matter how they grew up and what they thought. In the room, in the sanctity of that room, none of that ever happened. And I don't know, there were a few examples that happened with teammates, and I usually had a conversation, if you will, on the side. But in general, that team dynamic, and that's what I love about our sport, which may be different than some other sports, is that I always tell people who don't know anything about hockey is that our best players can play half the game. So it's a 60-minute game. No one plays more than 30 minutes. Maybe a defenseman will play like 32 minutes, 33 minutes. And so the value of the team means more than a lot of the other sports. So everybody is important. Even the guy who plays 3-4 minutes might be killing penalties or blocking a shot or whatever. So that part is important. And because of that, when a team is successful, you have to have that dynamic of everybody, and everyone has to have value for everybody. And so as I started to bounce around at the end of my career, I retired when I was 38. And I know this is a long-winded answer, but I knew I was going into new locker rooms. I played in one place for 12 years. Everyone knew me. It was fine. Then I started moving around. And so I remember telling my wife, I'm going to have to go out and hang out with these guys so that they get to know me on a away from the rink basis, so that they can trust me. Because when I call them out, I'm not just a crusty old guy. I'm actually being honest, and they know that I really do care about them and like them. And they know that I really just care about us having success as a team. And so I think it's about relationships. And I think that I've been very fortunate that I've been around a lot of good people. I got to see a lot of great leaders lead. And you take pieces from different people throughout your experiences, and you say, you know what, I like that about, I'm going to take that as part of me. And, you know, I've been very lucky and fortunate. I have everything I have is because of the game. And that's what I want kids to learn, is that they can think outside their box, think outside their little cocoon, if you will. And who knows? And so, you know, I think what we're all trying to say is, it's just amazing for kids to get a chance to try something they never thought was possible. And the thought that they could try something they never thought was possible will give them that confidence to try anything. And so that's, I think, what we're trying to do, because there's nothing worse than when you're like our age. I would never try to tread water. I don't know how you guys do that for that long. Like, that scares me. You know, no one wants to try anything new past 12. So we've got to get them when they're young to try these new things.
Thank you for that. That's awesome. And as we put a period on our time together, I want to just pose one question to you all. One word answer if you can. When your legacy is written, right? When someone says, boy, Clint was here and that means something, and Sybil was here and Brenda was here and Jamal was here, is there a word that you would want people to define your legacy with, and the work that you've done? And certainly I'm grateful for everybody being here. Clint, we're really, really grateful to the First Tee as well, and being proud to be partnered with you all, you know, in this work. So like I said, really grateful for that. And after we finish, we'll go Clint, Sybil, Brent, and Jamal, and then we'll kick it back to my colleague, Marty Reed. So Clint.
I'll go integrity.
Beautiful. Sybil, please.
Hopeful.
Access.
And for me, probably passionate.
Awesome. Wow, there you have it. Thank you so much to our panelists, Clint, Sybil, Jamal, and Brenda, for your time, your support, and your expertise. This was an amazing conversation with so many takeaways. I mean, I took a lot of notes. You know, getting kids excited about the game, keeping it fun, make sure we're creating a safe space that has a culturally educational component with proper training and safety in order to protect the space where kids will grow and enjoy the game. I love that the thing Jamal shared earlier. The demographics of the U.S. are changing, and we must increase access, or the sports, especially those non-traditional sports, won't grow. And we have to be intentional. We have to be intentional from the top down, with leadership sincerely and authentically focused on these initiatives to shift the mindsets and cultures and hold each other accountable, making sure that it doesn't stop here at this conversation. We have to continue to learn, continue to grow. So I hope you all are inspired to continue to do the necessary work that it takes to increase participation, play equity, and create more opportunity for youth to ensure that their dreams are not determined by their zip codes, race, and socioeconomic status. So thank you all for your time today. Continue to access our resources at positivecoach.org, and we look forward to the next roundtable conversation. Thank you all, and have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Great job. Thank you.